26 years. That's how long I'd been building NextCore's infrastructure when the CEO's son fired me in front of 47 people and handed me a polo shirt. Tyler Ashford stood at the head of the conference table like he'd just invented something important instead of destroying a man's career. 33 years old, designer sneakers, that particular smirk rich kids wear when they think they're being clever. This was our quarterly board meeting. Q3 results, burn rate projections, catered tacos. And apparently my public execution. No warning, no write-up, no private conversation. Just performance theater. Patrick has been with NextCore since the early days, Tyler said, reading from notes someone else definitely wrote. But due to performance misalignment and evolving strategic priorities, we've decided to part ways. I stood there, hands behind my back. Old habit from the Air Force. 20 years of service teaches you one thing: never react, always respond. My jaw was tight enough to crack molars, but my face stayed granite. You don't survive 26 years in tech by giving people the reaction they want. Tyler reached into a welcome box, the kind we give summer interns, and pulled out a navy polo, company logo. My name already printed on the tag like I was lost property. Inside was a $50 gift card to some juice bar 30 miles from my house. Oh, and unfortunately, he added, practice casualness. Your Q4 bonus didn't meet the updated KPI framework, so we won't be processing that. Updated KPI framework. I wrote the original framework back when this kid was figuring out which fraternity to join. Every head in that room turned. Sales guys suddenly fascinated by their laptops. Interns checking phones. The only person who didn't flinch was Stanley Grayson, our CFO, whose face clearly said, I already put a deposit on a boat, don't drag me into this. I took the polo like it was a dead fish. Felt its cheap polyester judgment. Thanks for the memories, I said. Voice steady, not because I wasn't furious. Fury is for amateurs. I'd been doing this too long. I walked out without slamming the door. They wanted the angry old guy story. The meltdown they could pass around Slack like gossip. I gave them nothing. Just boots on polished concrete and the smell of overpriced tacos covering rot. Here's what nobody noticed. HR didn't have me sign anything. No exit packet. No NDA. No acknowledgement my termination was legal. Just a pre-written email saying my access dies at 3 o'clock and good luck in future endeavors. Someone knew this wasn't clean. Tyler had been gunning for me since he floated into his made-up C-suite role 6 months ago. Chief Innovation Officer. Maximum authority, zero accountability. He didn't like that I had influence. Hated that I had history. Despised that when I spoke in engineering meetings, people listened. I'd flagged budget problems in Q2. 180,000 labeled AI transformation consulting that traced back to Tyler's college buddies running a crypto podcast. HR told me to focus on forward-looking solutions, not backward-looking problems. And now, here we were. I walked past glass offices where executives pretended to be on calls. Past the break room with celebration cake for another successful quarter. Past the front desk where the office manager gave me the pity smile reserved for terminal diagnoses. Outside, California mocked me with perfect weather. 72 degrees, blue sky, completely indifferent to my professional identity getting stuffed in a cardboard box with a polo and a juice card. I sat in my truck, 2015 F-150, rebuilt the transmission myself 3 years back. Stared at that polo. Then reached behind the seat for my personal laptop. The one I never logged into from company Wi-Fi. The one with a specific file on a specific encrypted partition. Clause 9, 4C trigger, PDF. Tyler might have fired me, but I'd built NextCore's entire technical infrastructure. And he had absolutely no idea what he'd just activated. 3 weeks earlier, I sat in a booth at Murphy's Bar. Smelled like old fryer oil and cheaper secrets. Laptop open, Jameson dangerously close to the keyboard. Across from me sat Raymond Fitzgerald, my attorney. Not NextCore's corporate yes man, the real deal. 54, former Marine JAG, subtle as a sledgehammer. He leaned over my screen and whistled low. You sure about this, Pat? I sipped whiskey. They treat me like an employee. Time they remember I'm the architect. The insurance was a licensing clause buried so deep in our vendor consolidation agreement you'd need archaeological equipment to find it. While everyone focused on product updates and Tyler's weekly innovation theater about pivoting to Web 3, I'd spent 6 months rebuilding our back-end infrastructure. Problem was that infrastructure wasn't NextCore's. Not really. We'd been Frankensteining third-party tools for years, patching them with digital duct tape. So I built something better, clean, secure, scalable, through my own LLC. Sullivan Technical Services had been on NextCore's vendor ledger since 2019. Infrastructure architecture and platform integration. Nobody noticed when invoicing changed slightly. Nobody blinked when my statement of work routed licensing rights to my LLC instead of the company. And nobody, especially Tyler, read the legal language about revocation upon improper dismissal of key personnel. Passed through legal like lukewarm air, rubber-stamped. Filed, forgotten. The clause was elegant. If they terminated me without formal review and documented cause, the software license self-revoked. Immediately, no lawsuit, no arbitration, just lights out. Petty? Maybe. Legal? Absolutely. Visible? Not unless you were specifically looking. Tyler never suspected. Too busy optimizing synergies and posting LinkedIn thought leadership about how traditional engineering held back disruption. Meanwhile, I built a legal dead man switch that could implode his playground. I tested it with Ray first, ran simulations with external counsel. Not a single red flag. Everything clean. All signatures legitimate. Even compliance logged it like another vendor line item. That's the thing about being quiet and competent. People assume you're harmless. They forget the quiet ones built the foundation. I printed one physical copy, stored it in my garage safe next to my house deed and Air Force discharge papers. Digital version encrypted, backed up twice. Iceland server. Micro SD hidden in a Craftsman socket set in my workshop. I didn't want to use it. I actually liked my job. Not the politics or nepotism, or Tyler treating our budget like his personal fund for whatever trend was hot that week. But I love building systems, mentoring engineers, watching something I designed actually work. But every time Tyler called me legacy architecture in meetings like I was deprecated code, that trigger finger twitched. When I caught him deleting Slack messages about that budget reallocation, the countdown started. Beautiful thing about Clause 9. 4C, it wasn't even hidden. Right there in plain English. Reversion of licensing rights upon improper termination. Might as well have been labeled push if stupid enough to fire me without process. So when HR handed me that juice card and discount polo, I didn't argue, didn't threaten, just smiled and thought, activate. Tyler Ashford floated into NextCore like he'd been airdropped from a TED Talk. Designer sneakers, daily affirmations, unshakable confidence of someone who'd never interviewed for anything. No resume, no track record. Just a press release announcing him as Chief Innovation Officer. His father, Richard Ashford Sr., founded NextCore in 2003 when cloud computing was still called hosting and nobody knew what an API was. Rich was decent at business, but he had that blindness successful men get about disappointing sons. Tyler had failed upward through 2 startups, both times bailed out by Daddy's network. Within a month, Tyler redecorated the 3rd floor. Edison bulbs. Motivational posters about radical transparency. Then he came after me. Started small. My infrastructure reports disappeared from agendas. My name vanished from email threads. Budget approvals that took me 2 days suddenly needed 3 reviews by Tyler's Innovation Council, basically his college roommates with made-up titles. I'd walk into planning sessions, find my seat taken. Not accident, design. Tyler didn't attack directly. That required spine. His weapons were vague jargon and passive-aggressive management. I'd raise technical concerns, he'd say, let's reframe that energy towards solutions. Worse, Patrick's perspective is rooted in legacy thinking. Legacy thinking. I was keeping production servers from catching fire while he burned budget on blockchain integration. Nobody, including him, understood. The vendetta was obvious. I made him insecure. Every time I calmly explained why his latest pivot wouldn't work without 6 months of rebuild, it was a mirror he couldn't crack. Every time an engineer asked me questions instead of him, it highlighted how little he knew. So I documented everything. Deleted Slack messages, mysterious budget transfers, payroll anomalies, especially the time $4,200 went to disruptive strategy consultant who turned out to be a DJ Tyler met at Coachella. Created folders, color-coded, time-stamped. Backed up to 2 cloud drives under project names like Q3_infrastructure_audit and vendor_reconciliation_2024. Even screen recorded a video call where he called potential layoffs team optimization opportunities and suggested offsetting morale with succulents. But I didn't escalate. Not yet. HR invited me to mediation. Quick sit down with Tyler to realign communication styles. I smiled big. The kind that makes HR sweat through business casual. I'm aligned fine, I said. Just not compatible with incompetence. Tyler didn't want alignment. He wanted erasure. I watched it happen in real time. He'd overwrite my contributions with his PR gloss. Company blog posts about modernizing infrastructure like he'd spent 18 months renegotiating AWS contracts and rebuilding deployment pipelines. He even took credit for vendor consolidation, the very project that housed my licensing clause. The bear trap waiting for his overconfident hand. One afternoon, he walked past my desk, phone to his ear, loud enough for me to hear. "Yeah, Patrick's great at keeping trains running, but we need conductors who know where we're going." I stared at my monitor, jaw aching from smiling because the train he thought he was driving was headed for a cliff, and I owned the tracks. It was 11:42 on a Tuesday when I found it. Going through Q4 budget allocation because something smelled wrong. Like knowing there's a gas leak but can't find the source. We were supposedly under budget, yet performance bonuses were delayed. Real bonuses for people who delivered results. I pulled raw disbursement logs, cross-referenced against payroll, then against project completion reports. That's when I saw it. Transfers labeled Innovation Initiative Operations totaling $187,000. Recipient, Disrupt Forward LLC. Ran the vendor ID. Nothing in our system. Nothing in accounting software. Just a line item with fake vendor code. Time-stamped 3 days before Q4 bonus notifications got delayed for compliance review. I dug deeper. Finance system audit log. Tracked approval flow. Tyler had manually overridden bonus allocations. Diverted funds to this ghost company. Transferred them to an account he controlled. Labeled it Strategic Investment and Transformation Consulting. He'd stolen employee bonuses to fund whatever crypto nonsense he was into that month. I printed the report. Didn't email it. Didn't save it on company systems. Printed it. Held it under my kitchen light at midnight like murder evidence. Which in a way it was. Murder of trust. Didn't call legal. Didn't blast an email. Didn't post self-righteous rants on Blind like some rookie. Slipped it into a folder labeled Fiduciary Concerns and set it on my bookshelf next to old engineering textbooks. Let it marinate. The axe was coming. This just confirmed Tyler was sharpening the blade. Next morning, HR called me for a quick sync. Patricia Coleman's office smelled like lavender and cowardice. Tyler was already there, sipping oat milk latte like he'd earned it. Patricia looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight. She cleared her throat, read from printed statement. Legal either hadn't reviewed it or didn't want fingerprints. "Patrick, we've noticed a pattern of interpersonal friction and sustained resistance to new leadership that's impacting team culture. Executive leadership has decided to move in a different direction." Tyler nodded with fake solemnity. "Wake for my professionalism. I know this is hard," he said, crocodile tears forming. "But sometimes fresh starts are what everyone needs." I stared at him. 5 full seconds, long enough to make him shift in his ergonomic chair. Then I stood. "Do I need to sign anything?" Patricia panicked. "Oh, we'll follow up with digital exit packet. No immediate signatures." Perfect. They'd skipped legal process. No documentation. No formal cause. No performance plan. Just resistance to leadership. Corporate code for we don't like you but can't justify firing you. I walked out slow. Not from sadness. From control. General withdrawing from a mind battlefield. In my truck, laptop open, tethered to phone hotspot. Pulled 2 files. First, bonus theft documentation. Emailed to Ray. Subject, Tyler's retirement fund. Second, clause 9, 4C_trigger.pdf. Uploaded to private repository under my LLC, version controlled with IP ownership metadata authenticated and notarized. No revenge speeches. No dramatic monologues. Just cold documentation and a clock ticking down. Ghosting a company isn't like ghosting a relationship. With a relationship, you delete photos, block numbers, maybe feel bad later. With a company, it's cleaner, more surgical. You remove your fingerprints and let their mess come into focus. I didn't update LinkedIn. Didn't post fake optimistic on to the next chapter. Messages, no rage posts, no cryptic subtweets. Just vanished, and nothing unnerves a toxic workplace more than silence. Leonard Washington, senior engineer I'd brought up from junior dev 15 years ago, messaged once. "Pat, what happened? This doesn't make sense." I left it on red. He'd figure it out. Not my circus anymore. Behind the scenes, Redwood Ventures started due diligence for NextCore's Series B. $50 million on the table. Suddenly, every spreadsheet, every process doc, every vendor agreement I'd touched was under a microscope. Except now there was no me. No infrastructure whisperer to explain why vendor 6A needs 72-hour lead time unless you email their scheduler with specific subject lines. No one to decode routing logic I'd built to prevent fraud and contain Tyler. I watched from the sidelines, eyes dry, coffee hot. Finance sent out corrected revenue projections. Off by 1.3 million. They blamed API sync delays. Truth was simpler. They'd never learned the two-step reconciliation I'd built because I'd never written it down. Not from spite, from experience. You don't hand manuals to people building your guillotine. Then technical infrastructure unraveled. 3 core microservices crashed simultaneously. The DevOps contractor Tyler hired after one alignment session couldn't troubleshoot it. Back-end schema used my naming conventions, my architectural logic. Not something he could Google. I documented everything thoroughly. Just not in NextCore's repositories. All in Sullivan Technical Services private repos protected by Clause 9. 4C, Tyler went on communications offensive. Weekly all-hands video called it growth recalibration phase. Said the team was reclaiming operational sovereignty. Corporate speak for we have no idea what we're doing, but we'll brand it like a retreat. Every metric slipped. Vendor SLAS missed. Customer onboarding doubled. Support tickets piled up. Customers started tweeting. Trust leaked like a cracked radiator. Tyler blamed legacy resistance. Claimed the team was unwilling to embrace new vision. Said this in Slack town hall wearing a shirt reading Disrupt or Die. HR spun it as transitional architecture challenges. But architecture wasn't the problem. I was the architecture. They demolished me without checking blueprints. Redwood's analysts weren't idiots. They asked questions. When answers were vague, inconsistent, routed through 3 departments with no clear owner, they started highlighting concerns in diligence reports. I imagined the boardroom smelled like panic and sugar-free energy drinks. Meanwhile, I was in my garage, hands flat on my workbench to keep them steady, organizing socket sets. The smell of old metal. Satisfying click of parts fitting correctly. Profound calm of not being in a fire while still holding matches. Tyler never reached out. But I noticed things. My old blog posts got traffic spikes. Code snippets on GitHub accessed from NextCore IPS. My LLC website got 12 visits from Palo Alto in 3 days. Still, I said nothing. No hints, no nudges. Just silence. Sometimes the most powerful thing is letting wrong people talk long enough to bury themselves. Tyler was handing out shovels. Thursday morning, 1 week before NextCore's big pitch to Redwood. Phone buzzed, unknown number. Bay Area area code. Corporate nervous energy. Answered third ring. This is Patrick. Hi, is this Patrick Sullivan? Voice tight, anxious. Legal counsel pretending casual. This is Alan Brewster, outside counsel for NextCore. I was hoping to informally ask if you might be open to consulting on some time-sensitive infrastructure matters. Nothing official. Just light guidance. Uptight lawyer edge. Reading from script while sweating through his Brooks Brothers. I let silence drag until his breathing got weird, then spoke calm as Sunday morning. I appreciate the call, Alan, but I'm not available for informal anything. He stumbled. I understand. Just thought I'd try. We're in final pitch prep, and certain systems you managed have gaps. Gaps. Polite word for everything's on fire and we don't know where the extinguishers are. I didn't ask which gaps. I knew. Automated vendor integration through my LLC. Not documented. The workaround preventing order fulfillment delays when our biggest supplier's portal crashed every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Also undocumented. I'd warned them 6 months ago that tribal knowledge doesn't transfer via osmosis. They'd let me go without transition because Tyler thought culture was more scalable than competence. Alan thanked me, tried recovering dignity, hung up. That night, I poured 2 fingers of Jameson. Not the cheap stuff. The bottle saved for significant moments. Pulled a manila folder from my filing cabinet. Inside, 1 sheet, heavy stock, Sullivan Technical Services letterhead dated and notarized. Title, Formal Notification of Clause Activation, Section 9. 4, see body. Due to termination without cause, formal review, or documented performance deficiency, this letter serves as official notice that exclusive licensing rights to the following infrastructure systems, platforms, and integration frameworks have been revoked in accordance with Clause 9. 4C of the signed Master Services Agreement between NextCore Systems, Inc. and Sullivan Technical Services, LLC. Access authorization is hereby terminated as of the timestamp of this letter's receipt, slid it into certified mail envelope addressed to every board member. CEO included, no email. No courtesy copy. Paper, tangible. Legal, undeniable. Paid for expedited courier to NextCore's office, scheduled 8 a.m. next morning. Not a bomb, a mirror. I knew what would happen. First confusion, then panic, then frantic emergency board meeting where someone finally asks, what the hell is Clause 9? 4C? Tyler would scoff. Nothing, just a bluff. Old guy trying to stay relevant. But Alan would know. He'd read it, maybe not when the contract first crossed his desk in 2022. But by the time that letter hit the boardroom, he'd remember exactly where that clause came from. That it was enforceable, because I hadn't just written it. I'd registered IP ownership separately. Time-stamped code commits. License key generation logs. Documentation trails leading directly to Sullivan Technical Services. The moment they fired me without proper cause, that clause went live. Not theoretical. Activated, they could still demo at the pitch, still show the interface, but it would be like showing off a car when the engine belongs to someone else, and that someone just repossessed it. I slept better that night than I had in 3 years. The boardroom was all glass and expensive furniture. 27th floor, panoramic bay view. Conference table that belonged in architecture magazines. This was NextCore's moment. Series B pitch with Redwood Ventures, the one supposed to launch them from scrappy underdog to serious player. Tyler was dressed for coronation. Tailored blazer, designer watch, water bottle with motivational timestamps. Crush it, 10 a.m. Unstoppable, 2 p.m. His deck had animations, actual slide animations. He looked like he'd rehearsed in front of a ring light for days. "Thank you for joining us," he said, clicking his remote like a game show host. "At NextCore, we don't just build platforms. We architect possibility." That line made Howard Lancaster, Redwood's lead partner, raise one eyebrow. For a 63-year-old venture capitalist, that's basically a full-body scream of skepticism. The presentation continued. Slides with graphs, pie charts of projections, buzzwords stacked like Jenga about to collapse, scalable empathy, innovation velocity, disruptive infrastructure. Not one mention of system stability, not one word about operational chaos bubbling underneath. Tyler clicked to a slide titled The Next Chapter. TED Talk cadence. We've positioned ourselves to triple ARR in 18 months through strategic partnerships and proprietary platform leverage. That's when Howard slowly opened his due diligence folder. I watched from the back row. Yes, I was there. Howard had insisted I attend. Said he wanted technical continuity perspective in the room. NextCore board, too flustered to think strategically, had agreed without consulting Tyler. Based on how Tyler flinched when he saw me in the lobby that morning, I think his soul briefly tried exiting through his expensive pores. But he powered through, pretending my presence didn't matter, like I was furniture. Howard flipped through his folder, page by page, took his time, didn't speak. Tyler launched into team cohesion and retention metrics, ironically highlighting the quarter before he'd arrived. That's when it happened. Tyler's phone, face down next to his motivational water bottle, lit up like a slot machine. 12 missed calls, all from legal. 2 voicemails, multiple Slack notifications from board group chat. He blinked, paused, swallowed hard. His voice wobbled slightly. "And we believe our culture is our competitive moat." Howard held up one hand. "Not aggressive, just deliberate." "Before we continue," he said, calm as a surgeon, "can we clarify something?" Tyler froze mid-gesture. "Of course." Howard pulled out one page. Printed termination memo. "My termination memo. Read it silently." The entire room went still. Other Redwood partners leaned forward, eyebrows knitting. "This document," Howard said, tapping the page, "states that Patrick Sullivan was terminated for resistance to leadership and interpersonal friction." Tyler nodded quickly. "Yes, correct. We had philosophical differences about company direction. It was a leadership decision." Howard didn't react, didn't blink, face carved granite. "And was this termination reviewed by internal legal counsel?" Tyler's mouth opened, closed. Richard Ashford Sr., his father and CEO, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Howard turned to a second page, held it up with 2 fingers. "This is a letter from Sullivan Technical Services dated last week. Clause 9.4C notification." Tyler's knuckles went white on the table edge. "This clause," Howard continued, voice perfectly level, "immediately revokes all infrastructure licensing effective the moment Mr. Sullivan was improperly terminated. It explicitly cites lack of formal cause, absence of documentation, failure of legal review." Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Tyler stared at his phone like it might start explaining things. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, sat in the back row, expression neutral, like waiting for a delayed flight. Because this wasn't vengeance. This was structural failure. And the cracks had reached the boardroom. Howard didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. He sat at that glass table like a man performing necessary amputation. Methodical, precise, inevitable. "This termination," he said, holding up my exit memo like court evidence. "Was it approved by legal counsel?" Tyler blinked rapidly, opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his phone again like a different reality might load. Richard finally stirred, eyes glassy. HR handled the process. It was a cultural fit issue, not technical. Howard didn't even glance at him. Flipped to the next page, held it up with both hands. Signed contract with a title bolded across top. Exclusive infrastructure licensing subject to key personnel status. Underneath, clear legal English. Licensing of Sullivan Technical Services operational back-end systems is contingent upon continued employment without cause-based termination of Patrick Sullivan, hereafter designated as key personnel. Revocation is immediate and automatic upon breach of terms. This document, Howard said, placing it gently on the table, was filed, registered, and time-stamped with your vendor agreements in 2022, prior to your Series A round. He looked around slowly, letting it sink in. Meaning when you terminated Mr. Sullivan without cause, without legal review, without due process, you didn't just fire your VP of engineering. He paused. You terminated the license to your entire back-end infrastructure. Tyler made a sound between a gasp and a squeak. You no longer own your operational systems, Howard continued. The fulfillment integrations, the data pipeline, the API framework, the vendor stack, the very foundation this platform runs on. None of it belongs to you anymore. Stanley Grayson, the CFO, who'd been eerily quiet in the corner, stood so fast his chair rolled backward and hit glass. His face had gone printer paper white. He grabbed the contract from Howard's hand, stared at it like it had bitten him. How did Stanley stopped? Grabbed the contract. His hands were shaking. How did this get approved? I drafted it myself, I said from the back row. Voice cool, steady. Your legal department signed off during vendor consolidation in 2022. Came through during compliance audit phase. Howard glanced back at me, then returned to the room like a professor letting failing students process their grades. Without this license, he said, you have no legal right to operate the product you're pitching today. Tyler tried to recover. Voice came out higher than intended. This is just a technicality. No, Howard cut in, sharper now. This is ownership. This is intellectual property law. He pointed at the presentation screen where Tyler's roadmap still glowed. This roadmap assumes platform stability. It assumes delivery capacity. You have neither. What you have is a legal deployment of software tied to a revoked license. He let that hang. 3 seconds. Every investor in this room is being shown vaporware. Silence. Thick, choking silence. The CTO, who'd been quietly studying the ceiling for 10 minutes, buried his face in his hands. VP of Sales stood and walked to the window like he was considering jumping to the next startup. The room was over. Richard Ashford, pale and sweat-beaded, reached for his water glass, missed the handle, nearly knocked the whole pitcher over. Alan Brewster, general counsel, finally spoke. Voice hollow, we didn't catch this. It was buried in vendor documentation. He pointed at me. He knew exactly what he was doing. Yes, I did, I said. I didn't smirk, didn't move, just watched panic ripple outward like ink spill in water. Because the product wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. And the pitch they'd rehearsed for weeks, the one they'd bet their entire Series B on, had just collapsed under the weight of one forgotten clause. Howard slid the papers across the table slowly, deliberately, like returning a bounced check that cracked a foundation. Richard stared at them like they were ancient hieroglyphics. He wasn't blinking, just sitting there, slumped in a chair suddenly 5 sizes too big. Howard stood. Congratulations, he said, voice soft but surgical. You just lost your company. Tyler half rose from his chair, hands flailing with desperate energy. Wait, I fired him because he was undermining morale. This was a culture call, not technical. You can't just walk away from a pitch over... I hope the polo shirt was worth it, Howard said, not even looking at him. The room didn't breathe. No one moved to defend Tyler. The silence wasn't passive. It was final, a door closing on a career. Howard walked to the glass doors, but before leaving, he paused, looked over his shoulder, made direct eye contact with me, gave one small nod. Professional respect. Then he walked out, taking $50 million in vapor with him, leaving the board holding an empty bag. Tyler spun toward board members, voice climbing into panic. We can fix this. There's got to be a way to re-establish the license. We'll just talk to his lawyer, negotiate, but the board wasn't listening. They were erupting, voices overlapping. One guy threw a pen. Someone else shouted, why the hell didn't anyone flag this clause? Stanley looked like he was about to throw up. VP of Growth whispered, he warned us. I remember him warning us. Richard tried to stand, but his hands were trembling. He clutched his chest, pale and wheezing like gravity just remembered to hit him. Legal scrambled for binders, flipping wildly through contract printouts, eyes darting for a loophole that wasn't there. I stood quietly, still in the back row, polo folded neatly under one arm like a souvenir from a theme park ride called Nepotism Implosion. Walked slowly toward the door. No theatrics, no head turns, just calm steps on glossy tile. Right as I passed the trash can near catering table, I paused. Looked down at the polo. Company logo screen printed like a participation trophy, then dropped it in. Didn't even look back. Outside, the hallway was cold and bright. Empty, peaceful. I didn't wait for the screaming to start. Just stood, buttoned my jacket, walked out the same glass doors Howard had used. Boots steady on concrete. Spine straight. My truck was parked in visitor parking. Fired twice from the same place, 2 different spots. There was poetry in that. Phone buzzed before I hit the freeway. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. Patrick Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, this is Howard Lancaster. Professional. Measured. I have a proposition for you. When can you start? I smiled, not the fake one from the boardroom. A real one. How's Monday sound? Perfect. Let's discuss terms over lunch tomorrow. Your terms. 3 months later, Tyler's LinkedIn said, exploring new opportunities in Web3 space. Last I heard, he was running a Discord for an NFT project that never launched. Richard sold NextCore's remaining assets for parts. Paid back investors 30 cents on the dollar. Retired to Arizona. Haven't heard from him since. And me? I'm building again. New company, funded by Redwood. Howard brought in 3 other VCS. We closed a Series A in 6 weeks. Leonard and 4 other engineers from NextCore joined me. We're doing it right this time. Clean architecture, proper documentation, and every licensing agreement, every vendor contract, every single line of legal text, I write it myself. The foundation's in my name from day one. Non-transferable, non-negotiable. Because 26 years taught me one thing. If you're going to build something that matters, make damn sure nobody can take it away from you with a polo shirt and a juice card.